Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Morning.
Can you tell me if you're getting any feedback from me?
I'm
Yes,
getting
there's feedback.
Yes,
feedback. Yep.
feedback.
You are?
Yeah, Lori, this is Nolan. It sounds like an echo.
Can you still hear that?
No, it's perfect.
Taken care of. You're good.
Okay, great, thanks.
I look forward to next month when we get to be acquainted with one another.
Yeah, I'm so excited. I wish James was here so I can thank him for all that work connecting all our schedules. That's always a task to do.
Of course.
Hey, Lori, I just started the recording as well and the live streaming, so we are 100% set whenever you're ready.
Okay, I'm just taking care of one thing real quickly.
Sounds good.
Marine, are you your office? I almost didn't recognize you. Okay, let's see.
Yes, I am. One of my staff members left the university for another position, and so we're now down to 3 of us between 2 spaces, and so there was no transition for me. Transition was from work from home to work from the office, but it's good. I've been riding my bike. So it's good stuff. I wanted to say hi to Marty. I don't know if you remember me, but we were cohort members with the SLS.
Oh, okay. Hello.
Good to see you. I'm so glad you were able to join.
Yeah, that's great. I didn't remember that, but now that you mention it, that was a really good program.
That was a really great program. I missed the kind of camaraderie there was, at least once a month. I always looked forward to it.
Okay,
Hello.
so I want to let everyone know that we are now officially streaming to YouTube. So Diane, I know not everyone's here, but mostly folks are here. If you'd like to get started, we have a call-in user number 3. I'm not sure if that's someone doing what I'm doing or if that's who that person is. Can you identify
Hi,
yourself?
Lori. It's Jamie Staley. We're having some
Oh,
technical
okay.
issues now.
Great.
So
Good. Just wanted to make
phone,
sure. Okay, so Jamie is here.
Yep.
All right, so I think we can get started anytime the chairperson's ready.
Ready. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming back. Good to see you. I'm glad that we'll be able to meet in person next month. That's going to be great. And I'd like to welcome Mark Worth and Shelley Corbin. Is Shelley on the call yet?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you for participating. We want to hear your voices, so thank you very much. And thanks. Okay, hi. Thanks, Dan, for arranging this. I really appreciate that too. Before we go, I also want to say appreciation to all of you who worked behind the scenes to try to have a meeting next week amongst yourselves. That's been, it's hard to organize everyone, and I appreciate that you're willing to do that work. I'm coming in from an iPad this morning, so you'll have to let me know if anything is wrong with what I've if I'm frozen or anything. It looks like I'm frozen now, but that's just my problem. If you don't mind, I would love to have Marty and Shelley give us a few moments, a brief introduction of themselves. We were able to do that in the first meeting, and I think it was very helpful. I don't know that we have the time to do a Robin again today. Marty and Shelley, would you mind telling us a little bit about your interest in this committee? We understand where you're coming from.
Absolutely. I'll start off with my name. So good morning. I'm Shelley Corbin. I currently live in Grove City, Ohio. I use she, her pronouns. And I am local to the area for about 7 years. I relocated to Ohio from Spokane, Washington. And I'm originally from Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe in north central South Dakota. So yes, I'm glad to be here. And to, I'm just thankful for the invite and for the openness of this committee. I am, interested in dialogue and sharing space and truth to find shared value and understanding so that we can really develop the solutions that to some challenges and or current emerging problems that we're faced with. And so I am here with an open heart and an open mind to have an open dialogue and to share space. And so with that, I will check.
My name is Marty Chodsmith, and I've lived in Ohio since 1979. And I came to do my studies at Ohio State in 1984. My family is from Oklahoma, but we all traveled the route from Oklahoma to Cleveland to Columbus, and had a significant amount of time in each place. My mother is Comanche, and I am a citizen of the Comanche Nation. And my father is Choctaw, although the information about his background was hidden for much of our lives. But he is also a citizen of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. And when I went to Ohio State as a graduate student, there were no other American Indian programs available. And as far as I knew, I was the only American Indian on the campus at that time. And it was still 60,000 people at that time. And so through my graduate student career, I was called on to help start up many of the services and programs that exist now at Ohio State. And that continued through my time when I was there. Currently, I am the Associate Director of the Newark Earthworks Center on the regional campus at Newark. And I've been there since 2005. I wrote the proposal to start up the center, which got approved by the Board of Trustees in 2006. As someone who has worked with the Newark Earthworks since 2005, I've been able to watch the site become very well known after not being very well known for a long time. And if you haven't been to the Earthworks, they're really amazing. I consider them a form of public art because they were places of great significance. They were built with great engineering skills and construction skills aligned with astronomical events like a long moon cycle that takes 18 years to culminate. And I had to learn how to interpret this site and translate what we learned to public education. And my role that I eventually found was to translate that from what we know about the earthworks through historians, archaeologists, and visiting the site to an Indigenous perspective of these sites. And that has been what I've done since 2010. I initiated the first tribal outreach project in the region. There had been none before that. And ever since then, several universities and the Ohio History Connection started their own tribal outreach programs to where now there's a American Indian Director of Tribal Relations in the Ohio History Connection. And they're having a big event this solstice weekend coming up with the Shawnee and the Eastern Shawnee tribes, who were among my first tribes that I had outreach to. And bringing American Indians to the Earthworks has been one of the joys of my life. But I see some parallels with the work I did with the Earthworks with this committee. So I take this work very seriously, and I very much appreciate being a part of this endeavor. And I am honored to be among people who are so accomplished and have such investment in the city of Columbus in the state of Ohio. So I look forward to working with you in the future, and I hope we can do good things together. Thank you.
Hey, Diane, I think you might be muted.
Muted. Sorry. Wow. Thank you both. I really appreciate hearing from you, and I think you'll be great members of the committee. Lori, did you want to talk about the switch in meetings before we continue our discussions?
Yeah, I just want to let you know where we will be meeting. It will be at the Coleman Administration Building at 111 North Front. I'm muted too, aren't I? Okay.
I could hear you, Lori.
Yeah, we could hear you, Lori. You weren't muted before.
Well, then, I haven't heard
can
from
you hear me now?
Talking, but I don't know it. Now, yes, we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Matt, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Okay. My phone dropped the call. I'm sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to, this change to in-person meetings has come about pretty quickly with all of the CDC changes, and just let you know that we'll be meeting at 111 North Front Street, which is the new Coleman Administration Building at the corner of North Front and Long Streets. I can send you a map showing you where that is and where you can park in the garage, which is just across the street on the other corner of the new garage. And also just to confirm that this time, day still works for you. I know folks have, it's easier to hop on a virtual meeting than it is to come downtown and park, and people have responsibilities. So let me know if there's an issue with this, and we'll try and figure that out. But at this point, we'll be keeping the 9 o'clock to 10:30 slot. And if we need to try and find another date and time that works for everyone, we will do that. But at this point, we'll be scheduled to meet in room 204, which is a large community hearing room in the administration building. So I also look forward to meeting everyone in person and look forward to doing that.
Okay, great.
Does anyone have any concerns?
Yeah, please do contact Lori about your timing if you can meeting at that time next month at this 9 o'clock. Not, please contact her so we can rearrange a time to meet. If following the agenda, which I believe we are today, our next topic is to discuss contextual context, the criteria that we are expected to report back to the Lone Star Commission with. when we began the planning for this meeting, for this committee, we felt that there were basically three areas of criteria: historical, cultural, and educational. And Doreen, we're extremely happy that you've been with us. I noticed in the minutes, thank you for doing those minutes, Lori. They're very clear about the, well, I think they're clear. If anyone has any problems with the minutes, please also tell Lori so that we can clarify anything. But she has summarized Doreen's comments about the history. So I'm kind of at a loss of how to start this part. Do you want to look at the slides that you've prepared, Lori? Would that help us begin our discussion?
Yeah, I just asked Nolan to please go to the PowerPoint. Because we have some new members, I just want to take a moment and just take account of where we are. And when listening, I listened to the YouTube recording of the meeting a couple of times, actually. There was a lot of information, and thank you all for really, I think, taking this very seriously and sharing your thoughts. And I just wanted to make sure I was as clear as possible about what I was hearing. And we could go to the next slide, Nolan. One of the things that I wanted to just take a step back at or to is, again, what the Art Commission was asked to do by the mayor's office, because there seemed to be a little bit of tension between the discussion about context and the detail of that context and the idea that the sole purpose of this committee was sort of a yes or no, the piece stays in storage or it returns to the community, and that's all that the commission's looking at. Those two issues are really intertwined. If in fact we're looking at, excuse me, returning the piece to the community, the mayor's or the administration's direction is also clear about proper context. And that is the meatier, more time-consuming part of this conversation. But you really can't have one without the other. There has to be some sort of context, and within that, what that material should address, at the very least, coming from this committee back to the Art Commission, to provide that backdrop for the piece if it is returned to the community. And it sounds as though, listening to the meeting, that there's a general consensus of finding a new placement for the Christopher Columbus statue, but making sure that if, wherever it's placed, that there's proper information around it that explains the various layers of understanding with this piece, much of which, the conversation about Indigenous people, the effects that they have had, the immigrant experience, in particular also the Italian immigrant experience. But I just wanted to make sure that we're all on the same page with this, with regard to context and the discussion of what the future is of this piece that's currently in storage. Does anyone still have any questions about that we need to go back and take a look at, or are we okay moving forward with the context discussion?
I have a question, Ms. Jamie. As I recall, the charge of the committee in the mayor's letter, it was where to determine elsewhere in the city. It wasn't to determine whether. So it's what you've just put up here appears to change the conversation a little bit. It says leaving open the opportunity to display it elsewhere, which was
that is taken directly from the letter that the commission, Diane Nitz, received from the mayor's office.
Yeah, I was looking
So
at that. Could you read that to us, that
if you
passage?
go to the, if you have the letter, it sounds like you do, Jamie. If
I
you
don't,
go
I
to
don't.
the second paragraph from the bottom in the letter, I didn't put this part in, but finally, I request your assistance to determine the final disposition of the Christopher Columbus statue, working with appropriate stakeholders and leaving open the opportunity to display it elsewhere in
Okay.
proper context to help future generations better understand how the statue played into our country's ongoing and evolving conversation around race and equity and why it was ultimately removed.
So this is a direct quote.
Yes, yeah, it's directly
Okay.
from the letter from the mayor.
Okay, thank you.
Again, correct me if I'm wrong, but in listening to the conversation that's happened within the committee, there seems to be some, I'm not hearing disagreement about whether or not, although it hasn't been totally decided, but the conversation about if the piece is returned to the community, what's the context of that? What's the information that needs to accompany it? You know, I think Dan eloquently spoke about, you know, it can't just go back out into the community with the original dedication plaque and information that it had. It needs to have a broader context associated with it. So I just wanted to touch back on that to help, I think, reinforce why this other hard conversation about context needs to happen and is in fact expected to happen for what goes on with next with the artwork. If we could move to the next slide, Nolan. Okay, just to retouch what we talked about and agreed to use at the last meeting, and also for Marty and Shelley coming into this discussion, put together a basic framework for the committee recommendations regarding the Christopher Columbus statue, that it won't be dismantled, it won't be given away. It remains a part of the city's art collection, whether it's in storage or it's installed in a new location. It's not going to return to City Hall or be placed within the city's downtown campus. And there's some question about the downtown campus. That's basically City Hall and the new administration building, the Coleman building. So kind of that area from Gay Street to Long Street, bordered by Front Street and Marconi. And the understanding that, the last point, that there are some issues that just transcend the physical sculpture itself and that they're significant and they may need an outlet beyond this committee to be properly addressed. If we could go to the next slide. So in listening to the meeting, watching it a couple of times and going over notes, one of the things that was suggested by Doreen, in fact, were 4 kind of organizing stories that maybe the criteria could be taken and put into stories. Doreen, as a historian and having worked on some similar issues, felt that the stories resonate more and are more memorable to people when interacting with peace or trying to understand the broader context. And so the principles or the organizing stories that she had identified was first Columbus, which is the name of our city, and has been used for branding and, you know, that's just who we are, the city of Columbus. Columbus, the person and explorer, who this person is, what's the information that should be shared about Christopher Columbus. 3, truth-telling, that, you know, we need to be honest about what we do and what we don't know at this point. Telling the story of the impact on Indigenous people. And one of her suggestions was to make it local. What happened in the Ohio Valley? What were the consequences, contributions, appropriations then and now? What are those kind of local impacts? Again, bring it home and tell the story as it relates to the greater Columbus area to Ohio. And the fourth was the immigrant story, 18th and 19th century immigrant experiences, which were, to put it mildly, challenging for most of those individuals and their families. And, you know, what's the information that would need to be associated with that to help tell that story? And then I added a fifth one for your consideration, which is artistic. You know, there's so much to discuss around this piece. But I think we also need to keep in mind that it's an artwork. It's a sculpture, a statue. It was created by an artist. You know, making sure that we tell that story, how the piece was fabricated, the origins and meaning of the gift to the city of Columbus. Because although the gift to the city of Columbus was a statue of Christopher Columbus, there was a lot of meaning at that time from Genoa, Italy, in giving a gift to the city of Columbus, Ohio, in terms of a gesture of friendship, goodwill between people, and also it coming at the heels of the end of World War II. And that, I think, adds some additional resonance to the piece and the story that we might be able to share about it. Actually, could we just go back again, Nolan? What are your thoughts about this in terms of organizing the context? We can do it based on topics, or what's your feeling about maybe doing it with these organizing stories and the 4 that Doreen mentioned, but then also adding the artistic piece? Any feedback on that you'd like to share? Thoughts?
This is Kimber. Perfect. I really like certainly what Doreen put together that she shared at the last meeting, and then I really like the artistic addition. I think, Lori, that's spot on. So thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you, Kimber.
Yeah, this is Diane. I would agree. It's a story in itself, and I do think we would be remiss to forget to do that. So yeah, I truly appreciate that. Fifth one.
Lori, can you hear me?
I can, Doreen.
Thank you. If it would be helpful, because we have some new members, and because those, and thank you for, I can't imagine how many times you listened to that tape to be able to distill that so well. But if it would be helpful, I could take some time this weekend and perhaps tease out a little bit more of what I had said sort of extemporaneously as to what could be included in the 4 themes and why I was suggesting them. But I absolutely agree with the artistic, and in fact, that was one of my points. I had thought, just thinking ahead about where the statue could go, was a suggestion I had made at the last meeting, which I could include in a summary I do, if you would like me to do that.
I think that would be wonderful, and really helpful to me, even having been at the first 2 meetings. So yes, thank you very much. Take you up on your offer.
I'll try to get that out soon. So
I know you're very busy, so I appreciate it. Does anyone really not like this idea? A lot of quietness.
Lori, it's Jamie. I just wanted to say I love the addition of the artistic component. I think it also lets us tell a little bit more about the folks in the Italian American community in Columbus. that were part of actually putting the statue up when it arrived. And so I think that's a really great tie back to our local community here.
Right.
Okay. I guess unless I hear something different, that we will start organizing sort of the contextual conversation around these 5 stories.
Yeah. And if I'd like to add a couple thoughts on these this framework, if you don't mind.
But
yeah. So like with this storytelling, the way I'm envisioning it, is that we have this statue and we have these information pieces that kind of surround the Columbus figure. Thinking when telling these truths, these spaces need to be almost as big or significantly seen as the statue itself. I'm not saying making 20-foot pillars with each of these columns there, but there needs to be an appropriate amount of space of visual representation when we talk about the truth about the Columbus. What people are concerned about are the atrocities that have been whitewashed, that have not been addressed. So naming the atrocities that happened in Hispaniola that he is being connected with and called out for is something that people are very upset about. So because all around the country, Columbus is taught differently. We know in this country we have a very tenuous relationship with history. Some people believe the Civil War is called the War of Northern Aggression. Many of us weren't taught about the Tulsa Race Massacre. Many of us weren't taught about residential school violence for Native children. We have a lot of holes about the Columbus story. And the biggest one that many people in my community are like, why aren't the atrocities adequately addressed and mentioned in the same breath of Columbus's discovery, and quote unquote. So when we talk about like that item 2, the person, the explorer, you also might even say the invader, because it's not so much a discovery as it is a full-on invasion of people. He didn't come here to live. He didn't come here to find a new home. It was for gold and resources and spices, and also expand wealth. So I'm sure there's more ways to look into that, but holding space for that 3rd item, he's a fascinating person. What he's done is really interesting, of course, and changed the course of human history. And what people are looking at nowadays, we know so much more about history, and so how much more about how history affects us. So, and the item of that 2 is kind of talking about that other part of Columbus, that kind of more holistic view of it. And with 3, truth-telling, absolutely always room to talk about local Indigenous people. Love it. But we also need to talk about the Taino, the people of Hispaniola, and their story. We are coming off the breath of Black Lives Matter and Natives Lives Matter. So with truth-telling, we're also looking at societal truth. The reason the statue was brought down it is an important element in this storytelling. So why it's put in this context to be such a powerful learning device. I would say a good way to frame this proposal, if the statue goes back up, the idea of it being as a teaching device. I think it's one of the best ways to view it is like, and how do we use a teaching device effectively? If it's just a statue and a bunch of plaques below, I teach children, I know what it's like that it's easy to skim past the plaque and get a selfie with the statue. So when we think about putting it up in the right context, we have to bear in mind, how do we use this as a teaching device, and how we use this, and that's the challenge of putting this back up, but how would we represent that visual space adequately and equally? So, so a friend of mine who works in the New York City Museum was just talking about how a lot of statues have kind of glass plane information kind of projected on screens in front of the item. So you'll have these different kind of lenses that look at an item. So you look at this angle, you'll see the Columbus as the explorer, you know, and in this lens we see it as Columbus invader. This piece, you know, why this statue went up. You know, it went up because the Italian immigrants needed to have a hero in the 1900s and 50s and wanted to be represented, and their struggle needs to be told as well. And having these different lenses. Hard part too is who writes this information as well. So those are my original thoughts. You know, when I see these 5 things here, and yes, of course, the artistic one's really cool because it ties us back into Genoa. And one of the main reasons this thing stays up too is that it's a gift. You know, we recognize the intention that the people of Genoa have, and so yeah, those are my thoughts.
If Laurie, it's Doreen again. Am I muted?
Sure.
Oh, can I go ahead?
You're great.
I really want to say I too appreciate those comments because I think that is exactly spot on. This is probably the largest teaching tool that Columbus will have, perhaps, to be honest, in the United States. And I'm very familiar with the standards by which reputable historical organizations or museums operate on that that interpretation part. So I think we do need to be absolutely vigilant about how it can be left, I guess, in a way as all of the sides presented, and be back to the truth telling. But my goal would be to actually get this draft out in time so that we can start to discuss it on the subcommittee to see if maybe there might be something added that we hadn't thought of. In other words, we might be able to give ourselves a little breathing space, because I think that kind of discussion on the subcommittee will be extremely, extremely important. We will have to sort of dig a little deeper on some parts of it. You know, there is that whole factor of the end of World War II and not wanting to have a community, an established American immigrant community branded as enemy aliens, and why that gift was symbolic to the city, but also not forget that the school children of Columbus were essentially mustered their pennies to be able to present a gift to Genoa. So that idea of gift is really interestingly in direct contrast to what historians have usually portrayed Columbus as. He did so much for us. That was one heck of a gift he did give us. So I think that might be a way to extend this conversation a bit into something a little bit more meaningful we can wrap our hands around.
Yeah, I think this is something that will evolve. I don't want to suggest that, you know, we're locking in, but I've been struggling to find a way to organize and to think about this information. And the idea of stories, I think, is a strong one. You're absolutely right, Dan. As with everything we have learned, it depends on who's writing the information, what the story is, and the relevance of that information. So that's an important component also. I'm not suggesting that the committee has to all doff their historian hats and write this information, but I do hope that we can identify the information that we would want to see included with the piece, and you know, the notion of it being a teaching opportunity is a very, very strong one, and an opportunity to present the various truth foods and viewpoints that come to bear with the statue. And I'm hoping that at least, again, just with the framework stepping off point, that this, I mean, it might be a bad stepping off point. I'm okay if you think, you know, this needs to go back. But if it sounds to you like a good place to start moving forward from, then I think that's helpful to kind of continue the dialogue and the conversation.
I can't let Dan's comments go by without a little bit of a response because of the use of the term invader. He's very loose with using terms without defining those terms, and that included the term genocide in the first two meetings, which does not fit the situation because it's an intentional act as defined by the United Nations. So we have to add 2 and 4 and say, what has this come to represent? We have a 500-year-old history based on writings of basically 2 men, Columbus himself and his chief political rival, original manuscripts which have been lost, transcriptions which were then translated. So unless there was a written history that I'm not aware of, we can't really come to a conclusion, we in this committee, about historical events of which there is debate. We can represent both sides of that historical debate, but it has to be done fairly, and we can't just loosely throw around labels and terms that are inflammatory in and of themselves, because I think that would be difficult to reach consensus, which is what this committee is all about. What Columbus came to represent, which was not asked for, but was basically something that was given to the Italian American community in the sense of the Columbus Day, naming of that originally, was a representation of a people, just as Native Americans are a people. There was another people involved. So the 2 and 4, I'm assuming within that there is the person, the explorer, and the representation of a people. We can't trade one story of one people for the story of another people. Both have to be equally, fairly, and as possibly historically accurate as possible.
Okay, I understand that Landa has her hand up. I can't see it, but Landa, did you have something to add?
I don't want to step on anything Jamie is saying. If anybody has to respond, or if you are not finished, please continue. But thank you. I'm ready whenever.
Yeah, I'm done. Thank you.
Okay. Saying thank you, Jamie, for some of the things that you said. I totally agree. Several of the things one of the things that Dan was saying, that we needed a hero. We were given the statue of Christopher Columbus. As Dan said at the first meeting, it could have been Marconi. It wasn't. So please understand that. It wasn't that the Americans needed something and was looking to this individual. This individual, Christopher, was an explorer. And let's not forget, you know, the world round idea, various things that he was trying to discover. I did not want to get into any debates with Columbus. That is for the subcommittee. I believe this committee is moving forward. And one of the things I've now said, and I will say for the 3rd time, is that I was looking at this statue to be replaced for an educational, so that there would be plaques, there would be information, there would be something on all sides. In the last meeting, Dan, what I understood, did not agree with that, scoffed at that, and now it's coming back that, oh yes, that's the way. I've said that to you almost a year ago to this committee when I was put in here sometime in early July of last year to meet with you. This is what this is about. This is what the Italians want. We want all sides. This is not a fight. We are not going to figure out if Columbus was right or wrong, again, from this committee. But those things need to be understood and need to be addressed. And as a child of immigrants to this city, a lifelong Columbusite, and my family, as I said early on, early businesses back in the 1927 was the first business my family put together in a bakery. I am very, very impassioned to tell the correct immigrant story. I have things first and second hand. I have truth to my heritage and to what the community of the Columbus Italian has gone through. And I want to make sure that that story is told, because for some reason, the Italians are still getting glossed over even on this committee. And that will not continue. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Not that any is being glossed over. I really think that the reason that we are talking is to present the criteria, which is in the 4 or 5 points of the PowerPoint. So thank you for your comments. I want to move on. Lori?
Okay. Nolan, if we could go to the next.
I'd like to just address real quickly just some personal comments to Landa and Jamie, if I may.
Yeah, could you make it short?
Yes, I absolutely will.
Peter, subcommittee.
Yeah, of course. Landa, I do want to apologize if it seems that I came across cross here as ideas about your original idea of putting other statues around Columbus. I was
okay.
I was shocked. I'm so sorry that would come across that way. It kind of put me back. But now we talk about the second meeting. We talked about a lot of like the educational pieces and like the more context. So I wanted to apologize to you if I ever made you feel that way. And it's I truly value the input that you and Jamie have put in, and I want you to know that I want your trust and your listening so much.
That's why we want to do the subcommittee, and that's why we want the education. And I don't want to take the time here, but we
absolutely.
All right, thank you.
So I just wanted to just say to you both, I really respect all of your opinions, and yeah, we can talk about these finer points together.
Of course.
So thank you. And Jamie, thank you so much for pulling up the schedules for everyone. I really appreciate doing the legwork on that.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Lori, I think you have a next slide.
Nolan, the next slide, please. Okay, again, going back and listening to the discussion at the last meeting, the first area of consensus was the committee's agreement to use the framework that we went over at the beginning of the meeting as the stepping off point for the committee's work. There were some potential other areas of consensus. I'm not going to say that it was quite as uniform as the framework conversation, but there appeared to be some consensus around a placement location for the sculpture should allow for some sort of reflection, contemplation, and I guess I would add to that education, because of the conversations that we've had about the educational opportunity to learn about the various facets that have been discussed quite a bit so far this morning. The other would be that the committee should recommend the context for the display of the sculpture. There's, what I mean by that is setting the groundwork, giving direction for the areas that should be covered, getting back to those 5 points at the beginning of the meeting, the story idea, whether it ultimately becomes that or not, but that the committee should recommend the context for the display of the sculpture, the information that should accompany it, whether or not that's something that is authored by this group or identified by the group, and then we retain someone to actually do the deeper digging for the context. The majority of the work will be it's an issue of representation and providing this comprehensive context. What will be there and what won't be there. It's loud and clear that the immigrant experience, the Italian immigrant experience, needs to be part of this, and the role in bringing the gift to Columbus, as well as the need to have the Indigenous people's experience as has been expressed. So that, again, it gets back to some decision about whether the committee will actually author this context, this information, or will identify what needs to be included and will kickstart that. And if we could go to the next slide. What really gets to the heart of it is, what are the major points to accompany the piece? And again, do we pull from those 5 items and then kind of populate associated with that? And the need for more conversation and greater depth about the piece at the committee meetings, establishing a subcommittee to explore or identify major points. It sounds like you've been doing that independently, and I need to be looped into that if that's going to be a subcommittee of this particular committee. As staff, I need to be brought into that. I wasn't aware of these other things that were happening. I know there was a discussion. I didn't know that it had come that far. And also recommending a thorough examination leading to the information that will accompany the artwork, which is really just a lot of words that gets back to identifying what will accompany the work, how that will be portrayed with the piece, and who's going to do that, who's going to do the writing, and the role of the committee with that. If, say, the recommendation is that a consultant team be retained to put that information together and to come up with a proposal for how that would be displayed with the sculpture, then that's one way of doing it. And we can check back with the committee, and certainly be checking back with the Art Commission as this goes along. It's not something that would happen in its own little bubble. But do you have any thoughts about what I've talked about so far? I know there's a little bit of looping that I've done with this, but I do think the areas do kind of touch back with each other.
Thanks, Lori. I think that you are summarizing the way I see it. And I just want to comment that you are a part of those subcommittee emails, but somehow they are not getting to you. And that's why I have forwarded you a couple of them, but not all of them.
And I haven't gotten those, so I'll go back and look. I don't know if it's getting caught in the city's security or what that is, but we can get that. We can get that rectified.
Yeah. And I'd also like to say, just from my own point of view, that I think it would be best if, in my opinion, that some of the points that are in those 5 areas are laid out by this committee. I love that Doreen is offering to write up as much as she can as a basis. I do believe that in the end, personally, I think that a consultant should be retained at some point to summarize these comments in a way that's digestible to a general public, if that's possible. and concisely. So that's my opinion. Any other thoughts? I'll throw it out there.
Yes, may I speak?
Of course.
Thank you. Yes, I would like to be very much a part of the immigrant portion of this if we're going to start dividing things up, as well as some of the historic facts as well. And I understand what you're saying about maybe another individual group that does this on a regular basis. But as far as the statue, there's things that I think some of us in this group can certainly give that someone from the outside may not understand or be aware of.
I don't believe that we need to divvy up these sections. Maybe I'm wrong, but it doesn't seem to me to be good for our own time to
I thought that's what you were asking.
Yeah, to have more subcommittees. I don't think that's fair to anyone.
I guess looking at a subcommittee, it would just be work that individuals would write on. I mean, how are you going to say it if you don't have some of the actual people that were involved with it give a side of the story? And I know that we have wonderful Doreen. I mean, she's like fantastic, but there's, still other aspects of this that we want to make sure things are being said.
Well, because when you bring in a consultant, that consultant's responsibility is to gather that information that has not been spoken at this meeting, at this with this committee.
Okay.
Diane, can I speak? It's Doreen.
Sure.
Thank you, but I'm not wonderful Doreen. I'm just one of those people who is intensely interested in this project. And having my own immigrant background, I seem to collect immigrant stories more than anything. I would consider it very beneficial to have someone start to write those stories. Perhaps even I would offer to do some preliminary oral histories if it could facilitate it. I'm very invested in this project because what happens next with the consultant, it's still being shaped by this committee, and their input while this is fresh is so important, and we can do a greater service in looking for a consultant who can carry that forward where there's more material. So even if we don't take another subcommittee, and I understand that, I would be happy to be a volunteer repository for anything that people wanted to give me, so I could kind of help organize maybe how stories could be laid out, and then that might bring us a little bit further to our completion date, which I wasn't quite sure what timeline we're on. So that's another reason I'm suggesting it.
I'll ask Lori hang on just a second. I think I'll ask Lori to tell us the timeline. One thing that occurred to me when Doreen was speaking, that this committee feel that you have to be the final word. As we all know, the immigrant story, the life goes on, and so it may be a part of the final installation of the piece, and you might refer to the next step for the Art Commission is to create a new work for the campus. It could be that the our artist team who takes that on has some sort of way of collecting stories again and again from the public. I mean, there are examples throughout the country of ways that artists just keep collecting stories so that people, anybody, can continue to add to these to the story.
I'd like to add something at this time. There's a wonderful historic building in town, the Valleydale Ballroom. I looked for many years to see if there was really much information on it. There was not. I spent 3 to 4 years of my life collecting information, and I ended up writing a book of the history of the Valleydale Ballroom. I'm saying that to you because I am very committed when we are getting into information that I am an individual who will seek out everything as well and at least give some presentation. I wanted you to understand my background on writing as well.
Great.
Thank you.
Chairwoman Nance, can I just speak, please? First of all, we are so fortunate to have so many wonderful experts and dedicated people on this committee from diverse backgrounds. I just want to reiterate to you, Chairwoman Nance, that I agree with the suggestion you made about having a consultant come in. I think that that is an appropriate step at the appropriate time, and I just wanted to reiterate that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kimber. Lori, where do you think we are now?
Oh, I think I'd like to go to the next slide, Nolan, if you could. So one of the things that's important as a staff person is collecting the information that contributes to, the stories or the information that's put together that's associated with this piece for whatever its next step is. And, we put together, starting at the last meeting, this discussion about contextual criteria, and I apologize. I know that there's areas of overlap, and I don't want to kind of beat a dead horse particularly, but I want to ask that as we're going through this, if you could make notes of information that you or your organizations have, because Landa, I believe you're correct, and Jamie, Italian organizations have a very deep history and understanding of this piece and how it came to Columbus, and probably know people that were involved with this, or their family members that were involved with this. And if you could help by starting to kind of organize and collect that information and share that information with me, I can start a repository. So, if we are able to move to having a consultant, think about how this information is displayed and what is written, then they have a really good basis of information to draw from. And I think that that's going to become critical, because there just is a lot of information, and there's also a lot of discussion. And so the sculpture timeline, the commission of the artwork to the present, we've certainly got some historical information that was collected about the piece and the basics of the timeline. But, if there's information that's out there about how the decision came about, again, to choose Christopher Columbus, to choose to give it to the city of Columbus, how that happened, and sort of the origin story of the piece, of the gift from Genoa, that would be really useful information to pull together as part of the conversation about the artwork itself, just kind of the historical perspective. Information, we have some clippings. I have some clippings, information from newspapers. I'll get those added to that resource list of the dedication, the initial dedication in 1955, the rededication of the piece in 1988. I don't have as much of, and Doreen, probably this, I think, is a place where you could really help, is the visual symbols. I think Diane has mentioned, and having worked at GCAC, is aware of sort of the branding that's happened around Christopher Columbus, and then it sort of morphed over to brushstrokes in flight. But the editorial cartoons, the visual symbols used in Columbus, and even it's how at schools, how was that used? The symbols of this piece historically here in the city. And if there are other things that I don't have bulleted, certainly add those to the discussion. stop me, and we can add those in, or you can email them to me. The cultural pieces, the sister city relationship with Genoa, Italy, and the gift of the artwork. Again, what's kind of the origin story of that? I think that there's probably more than what I certainly am aware of and know about with it, and it would be good to kind of get that information together, start compiling that and bringing it together. The position and concern of the Indigenous community toward the memorialization of Christopher Columbus statue. Dan's touched on some of those things. What kind of information, sort of key points, should we be recognizing as the context, the information is put together about this piece that would be associated with the piece? It's good to talk about it, but if we could start identifying things that should be addressed, I think that would be really helpful. And then the immigration experience. I think we're all talking about the same thing in maybe some different ways. The 18th and 19th century immigration experience for Italian Americans, certainly experiences of other immigrants coming to the city, and also, do we want to broaden it out, as what Diane was talking about? History, just, the world just keeps going on. We have new immigrants to the city, and is there a way of kind of capturing the essence of those immigration stories, because there's probably some similarities in those, and then some stark differences, because certainly things that happened in the 18th and 19th century are illegal. They wouldn't be happening today, or they shouldn't be happening today. And I think that as part of the educational piece, acknowledgement of that is important. Next slide.
Hey, Lori, do we want to add, before moving on to the immigration experience, what about migration? What about the great migration of African Americans coming north, and certainly a huge influence in our own community from a cultural perspective, and the Harlem Renaissance and so forth, but also a lot of this last year was driven around the Black Lives Matter movement. So that might be something to consider within our cultural context. I know it's adding a huge piece that, but anyway, I'm just throwing it out there for consideration.
And along
I think we
with
could
that,
look at that. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, along with that, then I think addressing displacement of Indigenous peoples, right?
Right. Right.
Can I say something, please?
Who is speaking now?
Marty.
Oh, hi, Marty.
Okay,
Yes.
Marty. Hi.
Okay. So as we were going through these historical, cultural aspects, and the next will be, and the next one coming up, it seems to me that those are very oriented towards one perspective. And I think some balance will help us illuminate the more, the different sides of these stories. So for example, the history of the statue itself is key information, but to balance that out, I'd be interested in knowing what the social and political context was in the US and the world that encouraged this gift to happen. I think in terms of immigration story, as the numbers, especially around the 18th, 19th century, there was a great deal of competition for people coming in through the country. But one thing we know that happened was that millions of people were coming into the country at the turn of the century, and the American Indian population reached its nadir, means its lowest point ever. So in 1900 to 1910, the American Indian population was 250,000 10 million. And so I think we will learn something if we try to see both, you know, multiple sides of these issues and not skew it toward one side or the other. And just to say about the Indian response, there's a response for all of these. And I'm a little worried that by putting it in only one category, we're kind of privileging one side in discussions. And I'm only talking about how we work through these issues. So I think if we can think about these as each of these issues has an alternate side that affects the Indigenous people that were here. You know, Columbus came here as to discover new trade routes, but he didn't come as an ambassador. Other populations might have come here as ambassadors and dealt with the people here differently. So I just want to be able to illuminate both sides of these issues.
Thanks, Marty. Important to remember. I appreciate that.
I agree completely. I think, again, the way to look at this is the initial organization, and that's going to change from what we're talking about right now to what the end piece might be. So thank you, Marty. Appreciate that. I think, okay, educational. We looked at it and identified under educational the Columbus Italian community's role in funding the sculpture, you know, the transit of the piece, installation, conservation of the sculpture, because initially conservation of the piece was paid for, was funded by Columbus's Italian community. The origins of the gifting, again, I apologize, but there's kind of overlap here. You know, the how did it come about, and the World War II European Reconstruction, and discussion of the mythology of Christopher Columbus, and I guess I should say the reality of Christopher Columbus, and the lack of context for the Indigenous community. I think, Marty, you raised something that I never really thought about, which was sort of the juxtaposition of increase in immigration into the United States and decrease in Native American population. I don't think that those are things that we readily know about, and that we can certainly and should include in this contextual discussion. And again, information that any of you have on those topics, if we could start collecting that and getting it in a central place, I can put it in box and give you access to it so that we can take a look at that as we're moving forward, and have that information. That would be really, really helpful. And then again, I added on the artistic piece of it, because it is an artwork, and I have heard, we don't really have anything specific on this, that about the fabrication of the work, that it was basically 2 pieces. It was cast in sand, I think, one of the last sand castings of its size. And I'm hopeful that one of you might have information about that you can share, particularly Jamie and Landa. I think that there was some information that came from Columbus Memorial. I'm getting the name wrong, but one of the local memorial and conservation companies in Columbus. But I don't really have any specifics on that. And I think that that's information that would be really helpful, just in terms of the physicality of the piece. You know, it could be anything, but, you know, it's a large piece. And if it was done in 2 pieces, that's pretty significant. And if it was one of the last large sand castings, which it's just not really done that way anymore, that's also significant information to have and to share. So having gone over this, I guess what I would like to do is just turn it over. We have, it's 10:16, just turn it over for some general conversation about items that I haven't identified that probably should be added to this contextual conversation. Again, what I'd like to do is take these bulleted items and start loosely categorizing them under that story. If we could go back to that, Nolan, the 5 story items, and that can change. And if you think it's a really terrible idea, now's the time to let me know that. And again, what we're talking about right now isn't necessarily the end result, what the end result will look like. It's just a way of starting to put this information together.
Lori, it's Jamie. I'm just curious
I think
if there's a time frame by which you would like all of these materials submitted. I know it's a lot to collect, but I also know we have an organizational timeline too, and I want to be respectful of your time as we're getting you these materials.
I think between now and the next meeting, as much information as you can give me in the next 2 to 3 weeks, 3 weeks in particular, would be really helpful in putting material together for the next committee meeting. I'd like to have some more specific items to talk about. The next major item that the committee will be asked to provide feedback on and to discuss would be site conditions, things that need to be in place for the artwork wherever it's placed, you know, things that need to be addressed. So that's something that's coming up. But if I could, to answer your question, Jamie, get information as much as you all have within the next 3 weeks. And you don't have to, just if you just get me the information, then I can start organizing it and put it into a general box folder that people can access and take a look at.
Okay, sounds like July 1. So I'll get you as much as I can by then.
Can't be July almost already, can it?
Yeah.
Yeah, the resources that you put together, I want to thank everyone who contributed to that. Lori, it looks really good. We've got a lot of reading to do.
And I wonder if it's important to think here too about sort of context and then orthodoxies. You know, I think certainly impulse would be to think of, you know, a more traditional kind of display with plaques and text, or, you know, ways to relay these stories. But it seems to me that the repository for context is so huge. It's unlimited, right? There's so many perspectives. And I wonder if there are other ways these stories could be highlighted and focused.
Yes.
And again, that may not be the work of this committee. But I just think it's important to think about too.
Can you talk a little bit more about the orthodoxy piece that you mentioned, Marine?
Yeah, I think sometimes we get so stuck, right? Thinking about what we know, you know, how this kind of information is displayed. I was actually thinking about a trip I took to New York City just a couple of years ago, and I saw the Tenement Museum, which is a wonderful place. And, you know, I took one tour, right? But they offer several tours that, you know, offer a variety of perspectives. And so I was just thinking, you know, what are the possibilities around this? Because, you know, I think historically, traditionally, we might be thinking of a plaque, but, you know, at this point, we need a book worth of plaques or 5 books worth of plaques. So yeah, I don't know, you know, they're and I don't know what the answer is around this. Maybe it's programming, you know, it's something like that.
One of the things that is kind of rolling around the back of my head when Kimber mentioned the Great Migration is that, you know, that was a significant event in Columbus's history, and maybe not something that lines up right with what we're talking about right now, but certainly that's information that we can keep and have available. Certainly with the Art Commission, the Art Commission has been advocating for a citywide public art master plan. So even if that isn't something that happens as a part of this effort, and I think that keys up with what you were saying, Marine, there may be other future efforts where those things can become important, and you know, we can look at some sort of a public art expression of showing those, of, you know, sharing that information with the community. So, you know, I wouldn't say don't think about that. I would say think about it, but maybe, you know, planners like the idea of a parking lot. We have it, but we kind of keep it to the side as an idea that's looking for another opportunity to be explored.
I
Lori,
really
could
appreciate that too. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you're first. Join in.
I was just gonna say, I appreciate too the fact that we're doing kind of the information gathering right now. I think one of the things that is going to become really important in the next phase after the work of this committee is wherever the statue is placed, that we're bringing in experts that help provide that context and do it in a way that's interactive and gets the proper attention. And I think that's a really great thing for all of us to kind of remember too. I know I can write for days about our sister city relationship, but there's going to be a lot of balancing that will be done by the consultant that's brought in eventually of all of our material.
Lori, if I can add a piece or two.
Mm-hmm.
Am I still on? Okay.
You are.
I think it is important that even if we seem sometimes like we're a little off topic, that we do keep sort of those ideas in their own parking lot so we don't forget them, because I think they will be very useful in informing what might be a new piece that to be done. So for instance, when we talked about migration being part of immigration, quite honestly, that's often how it's easier to approach in teaching. It's really about movement of people, because so much of it is push and pull, and one group who is coming in by way of migration affects that group that had just immigrated. We see that constantly, and we see it especially in Columbus. Columbus was the only city in the Midwest of 14 cities that actually increased its African American population percentage-wise than the other 13, despite the fact it had probably the oldest of the African American populations in place in the late 1700s already. And we continuously pay no attention to the 3 major Appalachian migrations in Columbus that have happened over the years, which affected everything else, industrialization and culture, by certainly culture. There are very differences in terms of neighborhoods that you can still see all this, and it does explain when you think about it as movement of people. And that may be a way to think about that other piece that is going to be a more of an explanation, because Columbus has no great claim to anything, honestly, except being a crossroads. And it's the north-south corridor, and it's the east-west corridor. The entire state of Ohio crosses at 70 and 71, and it was no different in 1830 than it is today in 2021.
We can lay claim to being the first artificial capital.
Absolutely.
I see it's 10:26. I don't know, sort of, Diane, if there are any committee reports. I don't want to, if anyone has anything that they want to share before we.
I have a question in that regard. Do you want us to record our subcommittee proceedings? Should Lori be a part of those, Diane, or is it that the subcommittee meets and reports back?
Personally, I think that it would probably not be a great idea for you to record them. It seems to me that you should feel relaxed enough to have your discussions. Reporting back, I think, is the most important thing. That's my opinion.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with that statement as well. This would be a good opportunity for us to, talk a little more relaxed and, more intimately, so to speak, about each other's perspectives and experiences.
Yeah, I wish you well on those. I'm in awe that you're going to do it, but I think it's really probably the most important piece of that of this whole committee. So thank you for your extra time.
It has to be done.
Yeah, I believe that this could be a fifth part of the story is the dialogue that this meeting has created. This is a long forgotten, long overlooked conversation. And if we have these, I'm looking at these 5 things that we're talking about now. Maybe this fifth or sixth one is the dialogue that began here today. So I thank you so much for your grace and your stories, and look forward to exploring them more.
I love that, Dan. I think the dialogue that we're creating both about the artwork and our convening stories is a really special thing. So I would be all about a 6th organizing story that talks about us.
Could I ask, for the good of the group, Diane, if Jamie Staley could tell everybody about the developments with the Alfreary artistic display that's coming to Columbus, since he was the artist who created the statue?
Yeah, if it's that would be. I'm interested. Tell me.
So the artist himself actually requested that his life work be donated to the people of the city of Columbus. And so we've been part for the last 3 years of facilitating conversations with our partners in Genoa about bringing that artwork here. It includes a variety of things, not limited to the sculpture that we're here to talk about, although the original maquette from the development of the statue is part of this installation. It has been accepted by the Columbus Historical Society, and they will be building out an exhibit as it relates to this, but it's an exhibit that I think is going to provide a lot of the artistic perspective that we're hoping to gather on this particular artist, as well as giving us another opportunity to talk about our sister city relationship for sure. The value of this donation exceeds 100,000 euros. So it is not a small amount of work. We're going to be working with local historians and the Columbus Historical Society and others to kind of pull together what that exhibit will look like, but it should be launched, I believe, in the spring or summer of next year. We're currently navigating transport of the artwork and the customs related to a permanent donation of this kind. So we'll keep you posted on its arrival, but it is a really special kind of addition, thank you, Jamie, to this particular story.
Great, thanks for telling us. Great. Anything else to report, or shall we adjourn? Lori?
I just want to thank everyone, and If you could also, for some reason, I'm not getting emails. If things have been sent to me about these subcommittees, I haven't gotten them. So if you don't hear back from me, if you could give me a call, my work cell number is 614-483-3511. It's on the emails that I send to you. And my work phone rings through to my cell phone. We'll be going back in the office. I think it's the 7th of July, but in July we'll be reporting back to our offices. So I can be reached there. But if you send me something and you don't hear back, for some reason, I don't know, they keep updating our security. I'm not sure, but I just haven't been getting these things. So
Could you
give me a
repeat
call.
that phone number?
Sure. My work cell phone number is 614-483-3511.
Because your email says 3611.
My email
Your email
says,
signature says 3611. And that I have
you're
been
the
trying
first
to
person to
reach
say
you.
that to me.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I've gotten things. I'm really bad with numbers. I would never be a medical professional or an accountant.
So is it
Thank you,
3511?
Jamie, for noticing that. It's 3511.
Okay. Yeah.
And my office number is 614-645-6986. And it rings through to my cell. So that's 645-6986.
That one is correct.
Okay, thank you. I need a keeper. Okay, I think we might have lost Diane. Did we?
No.
You might have. Oh, there you are. You moved. Okay, that's it for me. She may be frozen, so I'm going to take it upon myself to adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right.